All right, it's your brother Buckeye Doug Daniels. How are you? It's been a couple of weeks. Not been feeling the best. Still dealing with my leg issues, although they are getting better, healing up. I tell you what, I'm kind of like a dog. When I don't feel well, I kind of go in the corner and I just kind of rest. And I've been just kind of resting and watching. The last time I was on here 2 weeks ago, I think it was 2 weeks ago exactly, the first day of the Michigan stealing scandal had begun. And I don't think that the thoughts that I had at the time have changed at all, even though the evidence, circumstantial or otherwise, has gotten just worse. It's worse and worse and worse. I mean, oh my goodness, what a mess. And I don't, if that was the only thing that we were, aghast about or gobsmacked about, that would be one thing. But it's the bending over backwards by the cheaters up north team. That's even more bizarre. It's like insane. It's absolutely insane. The excuses and the focus on the stuff that probably doesn't matter at all. But that's where they are. They're all about, well, who told? Who was the narc? When you're in the mafia, I guess that matters. If you've taken a solemn vow in the mafia, you don't tell, and if you do tell, you're in trouble. And it points to, at least to a certain degree, an inside job. But the thing was, everybody knew about this. The other 13 teams, coaches, athletic directors knew what was going on. So they knew about it. They knew it back in, at least to a certain degree, in 2021, certainly 2022, and certainly this year. It was like the worst kept secret. Now, maybe you and I, Joe Fan, didn't know. But didn't we suspect something? I mean, the last two Ohio State-Michigan games made no sense. Maybe the first one when Ohio State's team was, half the team was out with injury or the flu, and it was at Ann Arbor, and the weather was bad, and Ohio State throws the ball a lot, and it was a bad defense that year. So the fact that Ohio State lost that one was not all that surprising. But last year made no sense. Or made a lot less sense. And, of course, now we have video evidence what was happening there. So it hasn't been a level playing field for any of the other 13 teams in the Big Ten that cheaters up north team were doing. And so it's the biggest scandal in the history of college football. This isn't point shaving because, as far as we know so far, we can't tie this to gambling or anything like that. If that ever does materialize or unfold, then it just goes to an epic level. But, the knowing what you're, whether, I don't care what you're playing, if it's checkers or chess or poker. If you're playing poker or any card game and you can see what the other person's hand cards are, you win. It's impossible to lose. And that's what this was about. This was Michigan knowing the cards in everybody's hands. That's really the easiest way to look at this. And I mean, literally and figuratively, you had cards. You had the signals are sent in using cards and, and signals, hand signals. So whether you're talking about cards or hands, it's the same thing. The coaches are upset about it. The ADs are upset about it. Now, as of the time I'm recording, this was 3:00 on Friday afternoon. And these things tend to break, like the next chapter tends to break later in the afternoon or early in the evening. I mean, at the time I'm recording this, Jim Harbaugh and nobody else has been suspended or fired. And only the fellow that was the mastermind of this has even been, suspended, and he's still being paid. So, I didn't write. I've been thinking about this. I've been watching everybody else's take on it. And some takes are like wilder than others. You got Dan Dockett, the guy he used to call the Ohio State games, the color analyst, Dan Dockett. I believe his son played for Ohio State for at least 1 year. Kind of always liked him because he was a tell it like he sees it kind of guy. He's been the most in your face. I mean, he's calling Harbaugh and Michigan everything other than, Nazis. So I'm not sure if I would go that far yet. The ESPN people are being a little more aggressive than the Fox people, and there are those who suggest, well, Fox's bread is buttered now with the Big Ten. Michigan's a big part of that. And ESPN doesn't have to use kid gloves, although it's funny watching Desmond Howard. Oh, man, what a guy. So there's things that we certainly know. We don't necessarily know all the whys and the hows, kind of sort of do. Obviously, there was this guy, he did some things, he brought some information. At what point was he doing this? And then it became officially sanctioned or okayed. Wink, wink. We don't know that yet. But here's the thing. If he was this lone wolf guy at the beginning, and apparently his association with Michigan goes back to 2018. So let's say he just started this as a hobby, he was fully invested. And somewhere along the line, he was presenting information to the powers that be. And at some point they went, this could be useful. And then they started saying, yeah, but you can do it in a certain way. Don't clue us in too much. If you want to hang around the sideline and give us some insight from time to time, okay. And then maybe it rolled into where it got. Sometimes the worst crimes start out, what is the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Maybe it kind of started out where this guy, had this certain set of skills that he picked up from his military service, and he wanted to kind of do some research and some, experiment a little bit with the whole idea of going to games. And I mean, you could make some kind of weird argument, some kind of thesis, if you were just saying, I'm going to do this. I'm just going to research this sign stuff, and I'm going to gather the information, and I'll put it to use some way. Somehow I'll write a book about it. These are the best signs. These are the signs that you probably shouldn't use because they're too obvious. Maybe sort of kind of you could say, just like most anything that turns out bad, it started out like, well, that's benign. No one's going to get hurt until somebody gets their eyes poked out. But at some point he became an employee. At some point he ended up at games himself, allegedly. And he's definitely been filmed and photographed on the sideline speaking directly to the defensive and offensive coordinators. And he's, pictures of signals, and he's right there next to Harbaugh. So there is little doubt what he was up to and doing. The only shadow of a doubt is whether that information, when that information was being directly communicated to people who could use that information in an advantageous way. When you're an investigator, when you gather information that can be used to benefit yourself, either in business or you can use, I was in radio for 40 years. We did research, and it was legitimate research. We would research the music, because you'd be surprised how many songs people don't like. So, and we would do research projects that would tell us, are we trending upwards? Are we looked upon favorably? How about the other, radio stations? Did they used to be people's favorites? So that all that kind of research is totally legit. I worked for a radio station in the mid 1980s, and it was a country radio station in Columbus, and they commissioned this consultancy. It was at least a $50,000 project. Now, this was $50,000 in 1984 and $85. They commissioned this consultancy to find out what their radio station should do. They were kind of a country music station, but they were getting away with playing, Linda Ronstadt, James Taylor, Creedence Clearwater Revival, even Neil Diamond. Heck, they were even playing we were playing a song by Paul Anka and Peter Cetera called Hold Me Till the Morning Comes. Great song. Had no business on a country music station. So anyway, they commissioned this consultancy, and the consultants basically said, you can't continue to do this cosmopolitan country thing, because there was a true country station in Lancaster. There was one, I think, in Delaware and maybe Marion, Mansfield. I think there was one in London. Basically, there were 7 country stations in Columbus in the early to mid 1980s. But there was only one inside the Columbus city limits, and that was the one that I worked at. But we were trying to be this country station, but not too country. So long story not so short, the consultant basically said, you need to go full force country. You need to start playing songs with fiddles and banjos. This was about the time Randy Travis came on the scene. Well, the owners of the company, they didn't want to do that because they were protecting their AM country station. And they felt like if we went totally country on this FM, then we would hurt our AM. Well, of course, AM as a music source was, even by 1984, 85, was all but over. Talk radio was taking over and had been for the 10 years before that. So what they did was they took that good information that said go country, and they didn't go all the way country. They didn't do that. And what ended up happening was instead of doing what they should have done, what they did was they killed their country sort of station to protect the other one. The other one eventually disappeared as a country music entity, and they ended up taking the station that I worked for. I think they first went classic rock, and I think then they went oldies, and then they ended up going hard rock. But had they gone full force country on that frequency in 1985, 86, to this day, they would be the number one country station in all of Central Ohio. But because they didn't utilize the information that they had commissioned, they ended up doing something which has been profitable, but not nearly as profitable had they gone full force country. What I'm getting at here is it would make no sense that if this Connor Stallions guy was gathering this information himself with the people he was sending there, spending money out of his own money. It would make no sense that he would do all this work and spend all this money and not utilize information that could have changed the outcome in a positive way for the team he loves. And this guy wrote a 500 to 600 page manifesto how someday he wanted to be the head coach and run Michigan football. That information was utilized. How it was utilized, when it was utilized, to what extent it was utilized, at this point is just conjecture. But if you look at the results, suggests that it was used quite a bit. Now, what was the chain of command? That needs to be investigated and figured out. But I've yet to find anybody who doesn't wear the maize and blue who doesn't believe that Michigan benefited from this ill-begotten information. Of course, then they can talk about, well, was it really ill-begotten? This guy was not an employee at first, and he wasn't using our money. He was using his own, and blah, 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 yada, yada, yada. And I'm sure people inside that program talked their way into believing that they wouldn't get caught, and if they did get caught, it wouldn't be such a big deal. Because they would just say, well, he decided to do this on his own. We didn't tell him not to do it because he wasn't an employee. Every scandal goes that way. Now, a lot of people think Nixon knew about the break-in. He certainly knew afterwards, and he certainly covered it up, and boom, 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 boom. All about that. Cover-up was worse than the crime. Jim Tressel got in trouble not because of, 3 or 4 players sold their jock straps for discounted tattoos. It was because in the end of August of 2010, right before the 2010 season started, you signed a form that says you are not aware of any malfeasance. You are not aware of any actual or possible infractions. And he did. He knew something was going on. He knew about the trinkets. He knew about the discounted tattoos. Now, his position always was that there was an FBI investigation into the pawn shop owner. He didn't want to alert the players or anybody else about the discounted tattoos. And he wanted the FBI to kind of do their thing. Eventually, they would come out with their findings. They would charge the pawn shop guy. And if his players were involved in any shenanigans that were illegal, he wouldn't be accused of having interfered in that. That was his position. That's what he told the NCAA. Basically, they said, too bad, so sad. You signed this paper saying you were not aware of something you were aware of. And your ulterior motives, however reasonable they were, not good enough. So we lost Jim Tressel, who went 9-1 versus Michigan. So it'll be interesting how Michigan tries to spin this thing in a way, and they are already trying to say, hey, let's investigate the investigators. Let's find out what crime was involved in the gathering, in the exposure of this information. But then again, everybody already knew it in 2021, 2022, and this year. Even before this third-party investigative firm found some additional information that sort of sealed the deal. All right. So my position is that no question this information that was acquired by minimally skirting the spirit of the rule that you can't do in-person scouting, and probably if he actually went to games, and it seems as if he did as an employee wearing Central Michigan hats with spy glasses, that's pretty damning. So we're in a time crunch here. Something should be done. What should be done? Well, and before I say this, let me use the Colonel Jessup example in A Few Good Men. And this is true of any strong guy. I don't care if it's a president of the United States. I don't care if it's a governor. I don't care what your position is. If you pretend and purport yourself as being in large and in charge, which certainly Harbaugh does, those control freak people know everything that's going on that directly affects positively or negatively the results on the field. They may not know that somebody hired a guy who has a problem, or that some guy was expensing some things in a, not above board way. But in terms of what happens with the score at the end of the game, head coaches know what's going on. They know. They have to know. They have to know because the buck stops with them. And another radio example, I was a program director at most of the radio stations I worked at. I was an operations manager at half those. I was responsible in one form or another for everything that got on that radio station. So I chose the songs, the new songs, the old songs. I wrote most of the imaging. That's the stuff in between the songs. Sometimes I voiced and produced that stuff too. I commissioned the jingles. In many cases, I hired the personalities. I certainly trained the personalities. I came up with the contests for the most part. And I even wrote and voiced and produced many of the commercials that ran on the air. But even the things I was not directly involved in, like most of the other commercials and the engineering, if something didn't sound right on that station from a technical standpoint, from aesthetic standpoint, I was the one who got the call. I was the one that had to go in and fix it. If the weather forecast was outdated, I had to go in and fix it. The buck always stopped with me. And it was tiring. And it's why I don't do it anymore. It was because I had to cover for everybody else's mistakes. And that was rough, man. It's just rough. But it's rough when you make, $50,000 a year. Maybe it wouldn't be quite as rough if you're making $10 million a year. And when you're making $10 million a year, and apparently there's a contract in front of Coach Harbaugh that would be in that neighborhood, it is your job to know what's going on. It's your job to ask questions. I always was asking questions. Why? I heard that song. What version is that? Oh, well, it's one that I like. Well, no, we don't play songs you like. We play songs the listeners like. That's a terrible song. Don't play it again. It is your job when you're the boss to ask questions, to be proactive. You've got to ask. If something doesn't smell right, doesn't look right, if there's any hint that something isn't right, you have to ask questions. You can't have plausible deniability because eventually you're going to get in trouble. Connor Stallions was right there next to Jim Harbaugh talking to the offensive and defensive coordinators. He was giving signals. He was right there, as animated as anybody else on that sideline, within 12, 18, 36 inches. Can you imagine operating any business or being any manager or where you're in a room and there are other people in that room if you don't recognize somebody or you're not sure why they're there, you ask, who's this guy again? Why is he here? He does what? And if that answer doesn't sound right, you go, really? He makes $55,000 a year and he works in the recruiting. So why is he on the sideline with signals in his hands? So it's Colonel Jessup. Most people believe Harbaugh ordered the code red. Maybe not in 2018, but by 2023, most people believe he was okay with the code red. But if there was nothing implicit, it's worse if he was so blind at who was right next to him, where he could reach out and touch him, if he didn't know what that guy was doing. Or somebody was lying to him, saying, oh, that's just Connor. Yeah, he's that intern guy. You know, he's just a guy. He wants to be a coach someday. So he's shadowing us. Oh, really? So he was shadowing us in 2021, and he was shadowing us in 2022, and he's still an intern. What's the story here? At some point you go, why are you in the room? And if there isn't a really good reason that isn't nefarious why someone's in the room, then you say, come on, what's the story here? I'm stating obvious things. There is no way you can look at this and not see it this way. Now, I'm sure they're going to try to find, yeah, but this, yeah, but that, yeah. Bottom line is, you're the man. Can you imagine Woody Hayes saying, I don't know. Woody Hayes? Can you imagine Nick Saban going, I don't know who that guy was that I kept bumping into game after game, year after year. Now, there are some that you would, yeah. yeah. Rich Rodriguez, maybe. Yeah, there are some clowns out there. The one thing about Jim Harbaugh, he's not a clown. He's not a clown. Would not surprise me if he doesn't run for the governor of Michigan someday. Maybe a senator, but probably governor. But you have more power at the University of Michigan football coach than you do as the governor of any state. At least that's what I've always heard. But Tommy Tuberville's doing pretty well. He was a failed football coach, and now he's a senator. Woohoo! All righty. So that's the story there. I haven't been feeling real well, and I didn't want to go on here because every day that I wanted to come on here and do one of these, I kept the story just kept getting worse, and Michigan kept moving the goalposts. What is the scenario? What is the scenario where this is truly no big deal? What could it possibly be? There's no answer to that. There's none. There just isn't. There just isn't. So anyway, if I was king of the world, I'll tell you what I'd do. I throw away the bars and the cars in the world and make sweet love to you. Joy to the world. Actually, short term, I think somebody's got to be suspended. I don't want to see a suspension for 3 games right now because guess who gets the coach in Ann Arbor? Boy, is that going to be something. I would rather them wait another week and then but I don't think they should be eligible for the Big Ten championship. I think somebody should not be on that sideline, and that probably would be Harbaugh. Through the end of the regular season, And then if somehow he can exonerate himself or sue his way back onto the sideline to coach in a playoff game or a Rose Bowl or whatever, okay, fine. I don't think he should be there between now and Big Ten championship time. I think long-term, 3 years of probation, even though this wasn't a recruiting violation, it all ties in. Winning helps recruiting, usually does. So at least 5 fewer scholarships for 2024, 25, and 26. I wouldn't mind seeing 5 fewer for 2024, then 10 fewer for 2025, and then maybe back to 5 in 2026. I think anybody who has dirt on their hands in this thing should not be allowed to coach or be the leader of young men anytime soon. They should have show causes. And I'm still waiting for what I think is going to be happening sooner than later, and that's these people who were paid to scout these games. They're going to start speaking at some point. When somebody says, okay, you can come in now, we're not going to ban you from coaching football. But come on in, tell us what you did. But I didn't know. That's fine. We're not saying you did. We're not saying you did anything wrong. We're saying the people that put you up to it were doing something wrong. That's all going to come out. It's going to be again, I think it could be the biggest cheating scandal in the history of college football. Somebody, but then again, look at what happened with Enron. Look what happened at, did anybody go to jail with The Big Short, with the Wall Street, with the whole thing, with the mortgage companies and all that stuff that that almost brought our country to an end and reverberated all over the world? Did anybody go to jail for that? All the things that were being done wrongly. But there was always a loophole. Well, we can do that. We can do that. We can do that. We can do that. Well, let's just create this. And then let's create insurance that guards us against that. That's what they did. If you watch the movie The Big Short, they basically did this stupid thing by divvying up debt into millions and millions of little pieces, sold those, and then took out insurance policies to protect them against that what they were doing, which wasn't such a bright idea. A lot of these people don't ever pay any kind of real price. I think the saddest thing of all would be if this Connor Stallions, who seems to be someone who loves college football, and I can relate to that, who probably maybe had some decent intentions at first. I think a mind like that is if he ends up being the one and only fall guy for all of this, that would be a disjustice. That would be an injustice. That would be a disservice to college football and to everybody. I know I've been rambling, and that's 2 weeks of rambling that I saved up for this. I hope most of that made sense. I do picks. I may get back on here in a couple of hours and do picks for the weekend, but this should suffice for now. And of course, while I've been doing this, I'm probably going to look at my phone. Let me do it right now, just in case I need to change. Let's see if anything is broken. Let me see. Michigan scandal. Anything new? Oh, no, it was 18 hours ago. That was 3 days ago. That was, an hour ago. What's that? Oh, I don't trust that source. Michigan reportedly has evidence that sign stealing scandal was uncovered and leaked by, let me see. Michigan reportedly has evidence its sign stealing scandal was uncovered and leaked by private investigators with ties to Ryan Day. That's now, I've heard that for several days now. Of course, that's coming from an organization that where the owner of it is a Michigan grad. Let me see. Anything else on here? No, 8 hours ago. Okay. Desmond Howard. Desmond Howard on Michigan Scandal. I don't understand. Of course you don't understand. I don't understand the rush to judgment. Poor Desmond. Do your Heisman pose. Alrighty. Ohio State has Rutgers this weekend. I think Rutgers could give Ohio State a game for 2.5, maybe 3/4. Their defense is pretty good. I think if Ohio State stops their running game, their quarterback run game, and their really good tailback, I think it would be hard for Rutgers to generate a lot of offense. So let's say they generate 13 to 17 points. Ohio State then would just need to generate 24, actually 18. I think they'll generate closer to 30 points, maybe 31. So 31-17, 34-17. Anything closer than that would be disappointing. All right. Are you having fun yet? I am. Go Bucks. Oh, and subscribe, like, hit the notification bell. I promise I'll be on here a little bit more.